Good afternoon, everyone. We'll do some brief introductions here, and then we're going to dig right into the subject matter, which is on entitlements and zoning. I am Phil Stupert with H.R. Green, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. So it's my pleasure to introduce these three fine young gentlemen. Pleasure of knowing each one of you. And I'm going to start first with Mark Nicholas, if you want to wave. And a lot of people know Mark in this market. He has 30 years of experience in all kinds of, from mixed use to residential development. Has gained entitlements on 10,000 homes and 7 million square feet of commercial mixed use, and also over 60 million in land sales. He was project director for a home builder for a while, and then was development manager for Castle Rock Development Company. Also a registered PE in Colorado as well, and very involved in EOI at a national and local level. Next, Todd Johnson with Terraforma, there in the middle. And Todd is the president of Terraforma, a Colorado-based company, and he assists clients in full spectrum of land development, such as, and this is a list here, you gave me quite the list, due diligence, risk management, cost and pro forma preparation, entitlements, civil and planning solutions, program management, metro district assistance, and project closeout. It's quite the list. And I know you don't have a lot of spare time, but in your spare time, he is an adjunct professor here at University of Denver, and he teaches a class on residential development, planning, entitlements, and legal and risk management. Next, Jared Carlin. And Jared has 18 years at Norris Design. He has led a wide variety of projects over his career, including politically charged entitlements and zoning, which are the most fun, the politically charged ones. Right? Yes. Those are the fun ones. And the neighbors, having all the neighbors yelling at you too, that's even more fun. Yeah. Born and raised in Nevada, Jared attended the University of Colorado and has an undergrad degree in environmental design with an emphasis in planning. And he also has a master's in landscape architecture, so that's awesome. A little bit about my background. I have an associate with H.R. Green. I have 25 years of planning and landscape architecture experience, and H.R. Green, multidisciplinary from planning to engineering to landscape architecture. And we're based here in Denver with an office in Colorado Springs as well. Well, thanks to each of you for joining this panel. I've talked to these guys on multiple occasions. There's a lot of knowledge in there, so hopefully we can draw that out today. So let's start off first with, you go back over time, for many years here, we've had a very strong home building market, especially in Colorado. It's been very strong here. Before the recession, I remember those years, it was all about getting land entitled and zoned and moving as fast as you can, and then the recession happened. And we had a lot of extra lots out there, but then that churned through very quickly. Again, in Colorado, it didn't seem like that lasted very long. And then we were back to, let's get land entitled, let's get it zoned very quickly. And that lasted for, 7, 8 years here. And then this thing, coronavirus, happened. Have you guys heard about that at all? Jared lives on a rock, so probably not. So coronavirus happens. So that's the first kind of question to address that right here and now. What did you see during coronavirus? Did you see projects come to a halt and a stop? Did you see some go on hold, or was it full steam ahead? And let's start at the end, Mark, with you.
Sure. Well, with us, certainly there was an immediate slowdown. I think everybody had to get their bearings and figure out how everything was going to work going forward. But we concentrate a lot on 1 or 2 projects at a time. So as far as a larger jurisdiction, these guys will be able to help answer that question a little bit better. But on our projects, it was kind of a blip on the radar. Everybody, just like us, we were trying to figure out, what do we do next? How do we handle this situation? The jurisdictions we're working in figured it out relatively quickly and kind of got things back up and running, certainly from a staff perspective and our day-to-day interactions with them. It actually turned around pretty quick. I was surprised. We didn't skip a beat on our project. We kept pushing forward and going ahead. We didn't see any drop in demand from our perspective with home builder interest or even capital markets, that sort of thing. We didn't see any drop off, so we didn't see any reason to slow down. That's for sure.
Yeah, you have that longer term perspective anyway,
longer
right?
Term perspective anyway.
Yeah, awesome. How about you, Tom?
From my project side, both on the design and the build side of it, it was discussed probably about, a week or two before things really took full effect in March. And so there was this lead up of, hey, we think this is probably a short-term thing. There was a lot of conversation early on that it seemed like it was going to be a little more of a short-term thing. So, and I think the critical thing for us is that we were considered one of those critical businesses in Colorado. And so for us on the construction side, it was really, hey, we are pushing forward. We are going to continue on. And I didn't really see too many others slowing down from my side. From the entitlement perspective, we continue to push forward on things. There was a little bit of rehashing that and readjusting that we'll talk about. But, from that side, it's still kind of pushed forward because we didn't quite see that there was this huge drop-off out there. So.
Yeah, we're working on a project together where I remember there was a brief hesitation there. I think everybody, right? We're all figuring out what's going on here, but then very quickly after that, oh no, let's keep moving it forward. So awesome. How about you, Jared?
Yeah, along the same lines, we feel really lucky to be in the industry that we're in, that we're still so busy and have work to do. It's by and large been pretty steady. We did in March probably, we have our firm's 100 people here in Denver, and we had probably 10% of our projects go on hold that we thought were related to the COVID crisis. And since then, about almost all of those are back moving forward. A lot of those that went on hold were in hospitality or projects in the mountains. And then just some of our clients that were, just trying to take a step back and put things on pause, but they're back. The ones that aren't back are, ones that are just dealing with other real estate issues that you would normally see, not in the time of COVID. So, our clients are looking, these guys are looking 2 years plus out when they're starting entitlements to get through, get projects approved and then constructed and open. So
I wish we could do it in 2 years.
right.
Used to be 2 years.
Yeah. Trying to say 2 years so we're working fast. Yeah. Our offices are open. We have 8 offices in Colorado and Texas and Arizona. Our offices are open. We have some of our staffs working from home really well with all the technology we have in their place with remote servers and putting that investment in their hands so that they can do work on big files and big projects really pretty easily. But we just, like I said, we feel really lucky that we're so busy, and we're optimistic that it's going to continue that way, holding our breath moving forward.
Awesome. Well, and for our firm, pretty much the same thing. We did have one project that went on hold pretty much immediately early on. It was a pretty big project. It was an age-targeted active adult kind of a thing. And I think, again, there kind of hesitation there, hey, I don't know what's happening. But then about a month or two later, get the phone call, yeah, never mind. Let's get it moving forward. Let's go as fast. And can you keep on the schedule that we promised before, Exactly. So it's like, let's go. And that was really the only one in Colorado that we had go on a temporary hold. Let's keep moving on. The next one has to do with, related to COVID again, but how has the environment changed for land entitlements with COVID, specifically with public hearings and procedures? So kind of focused on that aspect.
Yeah, I'll start on this one. There definitely were delays right off the get-go with everyone, and it was depending on the city and the jurisdiction how much of a delay and how quickly they evolved to try to work on ways to make things move through the process. And there were certain cities and jurisdictions that did better at that and that jumped right in and figured out how to do a public meeting virtually, a neighborhood meeting virtually, how to run projects and get there. Jefferson County comes to mind. Westminster was doing some of the early actual public meetings that went really, really well. But there was still that backlog. There was really nothing that happened for the first at least 30, 45 days. And then in some cases it took 2 or 3 months to actually get moving. So we feel like in our office we've been spending the last couple months really clearing through that backlog. It's been a lot of hearings, almost every night, sometimes on a weekly basis, getting through that. And I think that logjam is slowly getting cleared, but things are moving forward. It's evident of the fact that there's still all those projects that are moving through the process. So
and the technology with all those, most of them working very well.
Most of them are working well. It's Zoom and WebEx and webinars on a large basis, being able to call in and have a chat box to voice your opinions. And then as a applicant's representative running those hearings, it's easy to jump in and be able to control your screen and answer questions, and it's run pretty smooth, actually. And the public hearings, just in general, I think they're easier, but they're harder at the same time. They're easier, there's less emotion in the room because you're not in a room, you're all separate, so you don't feel the emotion from if you have a politically charged project that's not there. It's, if someone has a really negative comment, it almost looks worse when they write it down in the chat box, and you're not feeling that. And there's some good and bad to that. You don't actually get to look at somebody eye to eye. But, we also are seeing more people attend these virtually because it's easy to sit, making dinner and have your computer there and be able to kind of listen in and participate or sit on your couch. And so I think that that's a positive and a negative. We can, you always want to hear from the neighborhood group, but also you're able to sort of battle a lot of the NIMBYism that's happening right now by getting, your supporters at those hearings. They're more apt to do that when they can sit on their couch as well. And also, it's nice to sit on my couch, or not on my couch, but in my office at home or at the office in order to do these things.
Right. Quick question for you, because in the public hearings, typically we have, like you said, somebody comes up and says something, and then they might say something that sparks 10 other people, and then they come, and there's kind of this snowball effect that you see sometimes. Online, I mean, you mentioned about somebody maybe making a kind of a dumb comment or something like that. Do you see people jump on that? Is it the same snowball effect, I guess, as if you're in a real...
Probably more of a snowball effect because you're able to, when you're sitting in a hearing room, you're usually not able to talk.
Have a little bit of control, maybe?
Yeah, there's someone that has order within the room, but you do see a snowball effect and people jumping on those comments. But it also delegitimizes them in a way because if they are going down a certain road, it just makes it tougher for the neighborhood groups if they're not careful because it's all on the record.
Sure, awesome. Todd, how about you?
I think from the public meeting side, the biggest difference I have seen, like you guys were just talking about, is just really that interrelationship with people that you get. And it can be so impersonal when you're just putting things in a chat, and they can, get out of line. And what you really want to do, if you were in a public meeting, you'd go, hey, let's tackle that situation right here, right? Or the other thing a lot of times that you see in public meetings is, we have other stations that are set up after the initial presentation where I can go talk to you one-on-one, right? We can talk through this issue, and we can probably diffuse this issue pretty well. And that's a little tougher, of course, when you're in this environment. Sitting on your couch, listening to people, and you're kind of going back with them as well, and you're trying to get that information out there the best that you can, but it just doesn't. It's not the same really as looking somebody eye to eye and just trying to talk through and understand where they're coming from. That a lot of times you can't get in that chat. Having them give you a little more background. Whereas that stuff might be a little too personal for them in a chat perspective, but listening to them tell you that story that, hey, I've lived here 30 years and these are my issues. Well, hey, I think your issues we understand and we can help you through it rather than others just continuing to snowball on it. So it's been a very different perspective, of course, trying to dealing with that. But I think that's the biggest part that I see in really that's the missing part that I look forward to, getting back out there and having those discussions because I do think it helps. But we've been able to continue to move this industry forward, at least with the technology that we do have.
I think about what about with negotiating development agreements and all that stuff where truly being face-to-face is critical. And now are you doing a Zoom call with these?
That again is very similar, I think, to a public meeting setting where, if you're in a council meeting or a planning commission meeting, you have a little more structure, right? Whereas you're getting into a neighborhood meeting where you're really talking on one-on-one issues. And I think it's very similar, again, to when we're getting into some detailed discussions on projects, you're getting into those development agreements, and you're trying to, let's say, talk about, going through a charrette with somebody. You try to do that online, right? I mean, we can do Zoom meetings and we can show, here's what our project is and here's what we're trying to do. But a lot of times, having that in front of you and pointing to the paper and drawing things up pretty quickly, those are lost in it. Right. But, again, I think the technology is, we can at least show those things. We can at least try to talk through them as much as possible. And, I think just the understanding of those individuals that have been at these places for a long time, it's hard for them maybe sometimes to transition into that. That newer platform that we do have, but I've been very impressed with a lot of, both sides of it, the agencies and consultants really been able to transition in there. But, really to your question though, it is, again, development agreements, those ones that you really want to be sitting across the table negotiating, those I'd rather be in that situation again, sitting across the table from them.
Right, awesome.
Yeah,
Mark, how about you? What are you
Well,
seeing out there?
I tend to agree. I would offer a little different perspective too, though, in that sometimes in these meetings, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we get into the neighborhood meeting aspect, but you also can eliminate that redundancy of people coming up to the mic and saying, I can't stand the traffic. What are you going to do about traffic? How is traffic going to work? And you get those redundant questions that, okay, at some point we need a chance to answer the redundant question. So if they're just loading up in the queue, you get to, it doesn't necessarily detract from your presentation or the meeting itself. So I think there's some advantages
Yeah.
to that. And
You
I
kind
do
of get to
think
address it one time versus
you address it at one
10
time.
times.
You know, we've seen 15 questions come through on this one particular issue. Let's address that once and answer them all in one shot. And maybe it doesn't take as much time in a meeting for one thing. So maybe it's a little better use of time. I also think that, and again, like I said, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the idea that you give people a chance to make it easier for people to support your project in these things. And so they aren't traveling as well. So yeah, you'll get more people saying no, and it's easier for them to oppose your project because it's simple to hide behind your profile that you would log in as. But it's also easy for people to say yes. So hopefully there's some positive to come out of that as well.
You know, it makes me think, we had a project before COVID that went through the public hearings and, the standard way and got approved. And then during COVID, and I think just a lot of them had time on their hands and, people are sitting around with nothing else to do. And they actually formed a group after it was approved to basically not oppose it, but more just talk about how horrible the project was and go through all this stuff. And I thought that was interesting. I've never seen after a project is approved, you see a group form. I think it was a Facebook group or no, it was Nextdoor. And man, they went on and on. The project was already approved. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's just, to me, that's people having time on their hands.
Yeah.
And,
I think
too
it's,
much.
I think it's as critical as ever that if we're going to have more people at hearings and participating because it's easier, that we as applicants make sure that we have support there. And so we have to make sure that we're communicating that because you always need to, it's always best to have more support than you have opposition in whatever project you're working on. It makes it a lot easier for the
So
elected
you're talking
officials.
like actually inviting, trying to get people support to make sure they actually
You're going to have to
attend.
invite more and more
more and
because
more.
more and more people are showing up. Exactly, but it's easier to invite them, theoretically, because it's not as much out of their schedule.
I think we would hope that the percentage of the yes folks, it's easy to go and make time to say no to a project. It's easy to get your head around. I need to oppose this thing versus it doesn't really bother me. I guess I kind of support it. Those people won't normally show up. So it might be easier for us to get some of those people that would be on the fence to say, hey, I don't mind this project. I wouldn't mind seeing something new over there. So
Well,
maybe there's
Yeah,
something
to that point, in fact, George, you and I have talked about this before, about that invitation of supporters. And one of the projects I had this past year where I had about 5 or 6 that were going to come, and that night, 2 people showed up. So, because another night away from the family, whatever it is, but maybe now you actually get more participation from those supporters. So interesting. Let's keep moving along here. Next, let's talk about with the municipalities, and in this case, the staff specifically, so planning staff or engineering staff. How have they handled it? So from their perspective, or your perspective, looking at them, how have they handled it through COVID?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think, really since we've had the technology out there for 5-10 years, and me personally, I've actually worked on projects across the country, federal projects across the country where I had I had a contractor down in Arizona, I had an architect in Missouri, and I'm doing a project in DC. And, so that platform that was already out there and that type of technology and that understanding as a team and how to work that way, that being in the industry, I really think helped a lot. And the platforms being there, I think really helped a lot. Now, when you took it back into these agencies that didn't do this on a daily basis, I think it was a little tougher for them, but I think I would still give them credit there in that they were able to pick it up pretty quickly. And what I saw on my side is, I had the technology, I use it a lot, I use it with teaching a lot as well. And I would go initiate the meetings. I would help them with the technology just to get the meeting so we could keep things moving along. And I think you saw a lot of that collaborative effort occur with it, and I think people were able to pick it up pretty quickly. And I think when you see the productivity that was reported on, we didn't just all go home and not work. There was actually probably as much productivity, and we really weren't seeing a big downturn in plans coming back to us with reviews and so forth. I think that continued on. So I think with that technology that was out there and those things that had happened before, I think it really set us up for to handle the situation pretty well. Whereas I think back 10 years and there's no way we would have
might have
been
shut
able to
down,
operate,
might have been
right?
down.
We would have shut down a lot.
Yep.
It would have been a lot harder transition for us.
Absolutely. Mark, how about
Yeah,
you? with
I
staff?
would kind of reiterate something that Todd mentioned earlier, that sometimes though, in certain specific situations, things you want to roll out a set of plans on the table, you want to discuss something, point to it, collaborate. That's obviously harder. That's obviously harder. But I also say that I think a lot of these municipalities have figured it out. Again, to what you guys have said earlier, some better than others. The one thing that's interesting though is you might get more participation from staff in some of these. They don't have a reason to get pulled aside in the hallway if they're working from home, for example. Get pulled aside in the hallway, start talking about a different subject, or their boss wants to talk to them. All of a sudden, they don't show up to your meeting. If you're at home and you've got it on the schedule, I think we've seen a little better attendance out of some of these staff members than we might otherwise get. That they'd say, oh, there's 3 other people going to be there, so I don't really need to go. So I think that might be a slight positive in it.
Yeah, I've seen some of the municipalities that maybe don't have the best technology, and you were kind of mentioning some of this, Todd, is that through coronavirus, I actually would ask some of the staff, like, hey, how's it going? What are you seeing out there? How's it working for you? And a couple of them both said, we have the technology as part of the city, but I'm on my home computer, and my system's not great there, and you got kids running around screaming, all that kind of stuff, and sidetrack. But in some cases, I don't think they had the technology at home to be able to run the greater technology, if you follow me. And so that was interesting. I never thought about that their own personal equipment was the problem. So
Yeah, that's really what I was referring to, is a lot of them just didn't have the software set up yet, right? So, hey, I can set it up for you. All you need to do is click
do
on this
this,
link
this.
and boom, we'll be talking to each other in seconds, right? So
right,
it was great.
just the new normal we adjust to or ask them to adjust to.
Yeah.
All right, next question. This one we'll spend probably even more time on, about some of the biggest challenges in entitlements and zoning. And not only the challenge, but then, of course, how do you overcome some of those challenges? Mark, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've really seen recently is the opposition has become more sophisticated. Not necessarily smarter, but certainly more sophisticated. They understand the rules and regulations that we're up against when you put something forth to a planning commission or council, and here's the select criteria that you need to meet. Instead of just coming in and talking about traffic or open space or my views, whatever that case may be, they're now coming in and saying, hey, your code in this particular section says you need to do this and you're not doing that. And I think they're getting more sophisticated with how they're doing that, how they're reaching out. We're seeing a lot more activity on social media, obviously. I think that's a little bit harder to control through Nextdoor, Facebook, whatever the case may be. They're even coming up with specific websites to oppose certain projects, things like that. So what we've tried to do to counteract that is we've hired part of our consulting team is to monitor those, to get on Nextdoor, to get on Facebook, to look at their websites. What are they trying to do? Where are they going with this? Try and stay involved through the social media aspect. And then on our own social media pages, our website, our LinkedIn, all of those other platforms that we all know and love, we try to get our information out there to either preemptively strike what we think is coming or in response to something we may have seen on social media, so that we're always trying to put a positive message out and try and stay out in front of it as best as we can and not be totally reactionary. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes those opposition come in last minute, and sometimes they use these platforms like change.org where, we have an example. We've got some opposition on one of our projects from 3 people in France. Now, why they care what we're doing here locally in the Denver metro region, it's hard to explain, but it's a way for these groups, these opposition groups, to say, look, we've got 1,500 people that signed up to this petition that says they don't want this project to happen, when 99% of those people don't really have much of effect of what we do or don't do. So I think it's most important to stay on top of now social media and these opposition groups, watching where they're going, watching where they're trending, and trying to stay on top of it and out in front of it a little bit.
Yeah, because you think about moving forward, I mean, if that grows and you got people from outside of Colorado opposing projects, and in this case it was France, but
France,
let's just say, you know,
Yeah.
other states, Utah or whatever, you know, I have a friend in Utah and hey, you know, oppose your project in Colorado, and they can
Right.
do it. They can
Yes,
get on there and
exactly.
start opposing and grab their 5 other friends and do it.
Exactly.
So,
We even had a project recently that we haven't even submitted a formal application for it, that has, the neighborhood group has a website already prepared. Normally that's much later in the process as we get closer to hearings. They stopped and they had a roadside kind of tent, pop-up tent set up for the whole weekend for people to stop and sign the petition. And this was right before the neighborhood meeting, and so. I mean,
before you even submitted, you said.
way before we submitted, yep.
Yeah.
So they're getting more and more sophisticated and more out in front, so it's
Correct.
harder to stay in front.
Exactly.
Right.
Todd, how about you? I mean, challenges, not only just through COVID, but looking back over time, you know, some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome in some of your projects?
You know, I think just in general on the entitlement side, it's really trying to keep, again, I work on the design and the build side of it. So a lot of times you're seeing things that are getting entitled, you're going to get to the field and somebody else has a different opinion of that. So really trying to get the city sometimes on the same page, and sometimes you have to facilitate that issue. As quirky as that may sound. But I think those are some of the big ones that I've seen running across, just, you know, trying to keep a project moving. And even internally within the different departments, you know, on the entitlement side and the design side is sometimes, again, you have to go and figure out which department should be there. And if you've worked in that agency before, you know who should be sitting at the table with you. And sometimes you need to nudge that along and keeping that. And I think the biggest thing that I see that we're keep running into is just the affordability side of it. And you know, these little things keep eroding away and costing us additional dollars on our projects. And it costs really the homeowners at the end of the day. You know, we can go put an extra, you know, 50 feet of storm pipe in here. We can do some more erosion control, but does it really make the difference at the end of the day? And agency, if you're going to have to take on that responsibility, what is that really doing to you later on? Mm-hmm. And just trying to have that conversation, you know, and constantly, I think, beat that drum, because we're all here at the end of the day trying to keep things, you know, we're trying to provide homes like we were talking about early on, and we're trying to provide homes with an affordability side, and just always trying to keep that. But that always goes back to a lot of times just getting the agencies to help and getting them at the table,
Yeah.
making sure that they understand that side of it, all those departments. So.
I can't remember if it was Urban Land Institute or maybe it was NHB put out a report about entitlements and zoning, and as they get extended each year, the cost of the project, to your point, which then rolls in the price of homes. Because you think in Colorado, the demand is so strong, inventory is so low. If we're not getting those out there, what happens to the homes that are on the market is the prices go up. And I think we've been seeing that, the price escalation in Colorado big time. And what you were telling me before about California compared to California, you want to share some of that? I thought that was really interesting in
Yeah, I
terms
don't know
of.
how actually accurate it all was, but it was basically
It was online,
Yeah,
so
it's
it had to be
online,
accurate.
it's on Facebook. Yeah, I mean, it's 120. You need $120,000 to live in California salary, and something like 100 in Colorado, and it's number 2 in the United
So
States.
we're number 2 in terms of the next highest salary.
according to the
And to where you live here.
data.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive to live here.
Yeah, I mean, it
guess
is.
the
It's
point.
become that.
Yeah.
Well, and
for sure.
I'd just add, you know, earlier, the state demographer was talking, and I was so interested to hear her comments about how underhoused we are. I mean, here's the state of Colorado saying, we're trying to house all these people. We are in a dire situation here. And I asked her, you know, to these municipalities that are these ultimate authorities for us to get plans approved, do they pay attention to this information? And I said, because we are data nerds at our shop. We look at every piece of data you can possibly imagine to try and make our project successful as possible. We bring that information in front of staff, council, planning commission, and it sometimes it falls on deaf ears because, hey, you're the developer. You're trying to make money on this project. You're probably making these stats up. And so the conversation was, man, could you please come to some of our public hearings and give this same information as a totally unbiased party, other than just telling the simple facts that we are so severely underhoused and affordability is getting crazy, that when you try to do a project that brings in some attainable housing and maybe even portions of affordable housing, that we need a different voice sometimes, somebody outside our world of probably who everybody here that's listening in this conference probably has a similar situation to what we're talking about. How do we get some outside parties to come in and say, they're not lying to you. This is true information. These are real facts. That's something we try to do, but sometimes it's hard when it comes from us delivering the message.
Right, no, it's a good point. Well, kind of along the same lines here, what I've noticed just over the years is that as our teams, you're representing the developer, you're kind of like an owner's rep helping developer, and you and I are consultants. And, one of the things I've seen over time to move projects forward quickly through entitlements and zoning is to have a really strong project lead who's responsible for everything. So like in some cases, it might be Mark, you as a developer.
Yep.
Other cases, it might be Todd, and then you build a business around doing that. And then you as a consultant, it might be us, really driving that. And if you don't have that, I've seen projects kind of not move along very quickly. So you need that strong project lead. And you have to be really well organized because let's face it, this is hard work. It's not simple stuff. I mean, it's very hard work. You got to put your time in every day. You gotta drive this. So I think over time I've seen our industry get better at that, and we've kind of learned our lessons and got a lot better. But then you go into a municipality, and they don't have a lead to move it forward quickly. And I just kind of, you guys seen that, and because I've had some where they have that lead, and you just work directly with that person, and it seems like you can move it quickly. Mm-hmm. But if they don't have that, I've seen the projects waver. Have you guys?
I think you always have to identify that structure, right?
Who's really making the decision?
Who's really making the decisions, right? On both of our sides. I think to your point, Phil, you understand your team structure on the consulting side and in the development world, right? Who's going to take which lead? Who's the good cop? Who's the bad cop, right? Who has this? What strengths do you have? And let that team move forward, and really understanding the opposition that you do have, and trying to understand your project. But I think on the other side of the table is sometimes it's not the individual that may be running your project. It could be others within that industry or within that municipality that are really the decision makers. I need them at the table, and identifying that. Otherwise, to your point, you're wasting time. I can talk to the planner, I can talk to the engineer, but if I don't have the decision maker there, that's hurting our project. And time kills all deals.
Yes, or you could have the decision maker that you think's the decision maker, then it turns out they're really not.
Yeah, identifying.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, that happens, or turnover within the municipality. Sometimes that happens, and you start fresh again.
I've had that exact thing happen where they presented themselves as the decision maker, right?
Yep.
And you get down the road, and at the 11th hour, and find out they're not at all the decision maker. It was this other person over here. You kind of, in some ways, wasted all that time with that one individual. So awesome. Let's keep moving on here. Next, let's talk about our neighbors' opposition to our projects, which we experience on every project we do anymore. And we had the social media aspect that now is a part of it, and we've kind of already talked a little bit about that. So what is your strategy, and we'll start with you, Mark, what is your strategy, that public opposition, number one, and number two, the social media aspect of it as well?
And like you said, we talked on this a little bit. I'll try not to repeat myself too much. But the idea is to stay on top of your opposition, figure out who they are. And that's sometimes not as easy as it sounds. If you don't have somebody in the jurisdiction you're working in that's there on that Nextdoor page or on that Facebook page, and you're not aware of it, a little bit of that is shame on you. You have to figure that out. That is one piece of advice that I give, is you have to figure out who your opposition is, where they're coming from, and why they're doing it. We have a couple of projects where in the past we've had people on social media, and it looks like there's thousands of people that are opposing our project, like we discussed earlier. Turns out there's probably 20 or 30 people that are directly adjacent to us that really have an issue, and they've managed to muster up this support behind them, because you can anonymously sign up to some of these sites and be a part of an opposition that otherwise you wouldn't, or you wouldn't know about. So the social media aspect certainly makes it easier for people to oppose. And I mentioned this earlier, I think we need to try and figure out how to turn the tables a little bit to make it easier for people to support us as well. We're constantly out there with community leaders, business leaders, sitting at, well, not anymore. We used to sit in people's living rooms and have conversations, trying to get the people that are directly adjacent to us to understand what we're doing. I think social media has let us all kind of sit in our little cocoon and say, this is my world, I oppose it no matter what. And they don't get a chance to meet me face to face and say, no, you listen, this isn't all bad. Here's some of the good that's going to come from that. We lack that now because of social media, I think. And so if you're not putting those positive messages out about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and you're just reactionary to the social media that's out there, I think you're losing the battle. I think you have to stay ahead of it, and I think you have to keep projecting the positive things that will come out of your new community that you'll build. In our cases, where we build communities, it's about that. How do we make everything around us better as well? Sure, there are setbacks. Sure, there are not literal, sometimes literal setbacks are an issue. But there are, traffic implications and water implications, all those typical things we hear. We know those are coming. It's I live in this particular house and I have this particular view and you're going to block it. What are you going to do for me? Those are the kind of things that are easy to come out, and you try and address those the best you can. It's a lot of times those are easier in person, but you have to try and do it through social media. And we try to have a face on that as well. Jared, we talked about that earlier, of trying to be able to see someone in a meeting and make them answer the video call versus just typing an email that can be so impersonal.
Well, I look at 20, 25 years ago when I got into business, I remember we didn't really do much engagement with the public. Yep. You submit it, you get to the public hearing, you go, and that's when you learned everything that they're opposed to. Whereas now, let's go 10 years ago. Yeah. Okay, we started learning it early on, and we kind of knew what was going on before the public hearings. Fast forward to today, like you were just saying, they're forming websites before we even submit the project. So I've seen it just completely change in my career. So it's like, look forward, what's it going to be like down the road? I mean, I'm kind of curious, looking to the future.
It's going to be worse.
Not better? Not better?
Well,
I think this is, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the, the biggest challenge I see right now is just interaction with neighborhood groups on projects that are controversial. I mean, hopefully most of your projects aren't going to be that way, or depending on what you're working on, but it's all about relationships. And if you can't have those relationships and build on those relationships early on and continue that through the process, it's really hard to get your project approved. And given what we're dealing with right now with virtual stuff, if we're still trying to meet for coffee, socially distanced and everything. But if we're setting up calls with neighborhood neighbors of our projects, that we're trying to work on our relationships and trying to work something out. I mean, we're making sure that you're always calling and using video and looking at them eye to eye is really, really important, and just continue those relationships because they're critical, just like you all are saying. One of the things that we're doing at Norris Design is we've created a virtual neighborhood room, which is something that you would add on to an actual virtual neighborhood meeting and add an actual website if you were to already be at that particular point early on in the process. But virtual neighborhood meeting would be another place for someone to jump online, click on a website, and go into a neighborhood room at their own convenience, at their own time, and check in, sign in, get their data, contact information, and then maybe they don't get to get cookies and milk, but they get to walk to the next station and look at, if they want to see anything about traffic, they can go walk to that part of the room, or they can move and talk to the developer. And if they click on the developer, he has she has something that they want to say about the project, and then they go over to the architecture corner and click on the architecture elevations and open space and trails and et cetera. And they can leave comments and suggestions and questions, and then they can kind of look at the center of the room and kind of play around with the overall project, and you can kind of set it up either way. It's just one of those things that we're seeing as another tool if you can't actually be there in person, to try to make it the most like if you're in person as possible. And one of the other things we're been working on over the last few years at Norris is branding and trying to using branding to create placemaking and to try to figure out how a project really truly fits in within the community. And we're using our brand strategist right now, even more so from a storytelling perspective and a messaging perspective, so that in all of these different elements that messaging is exactly on point to the best it possibly can be. Again, for those tough projects, not every project.
And you do that very early on. I know you
Very
and
early
I
on.
have talked about that before, where, again, before submittal, you start forming that theme, that story, things like that. And then when you're sitting on used to be the couch with everybody, you could talk about that. And I always think of, you told me this a while back, that you had a story about Sweet Sharon, where, the whole idea that you were able to spend the time sitting down, forming that relationship, and then at the end, she was in support of your project. And, again, I've seen that too, that we've been able to kind of turn some people to our side through face to face, right? It's just a huge thing. They're not going
Yeah.
to say things face to face like they're going to do on sitting at the couch on their phone. So it's just going to be, I don't know, new paradigm.
It's a new way. You have to think a little bit differently than we have been about all of this stuff. And if you do it the right way, you can still be really successful,
Absolutely.
hopefully, a
Awesome.
little early on.
Awesome. Well, we're getting close to running out of time, so thanks to each one of you for all your knowledge and sharing your knowledge, and then John to CREJ, and you guys, great organization. All of us were talking about how we just think so highly of this organization. Thanks for allowing us to do this, and thanks for everything you do as well in this new paradigm that you're adjusting to. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So we are now taking a little commercial break, I think, to see Phil's face again up on the screen. Yeah, once again. Might as well, right? And then we've got the home builder panel coming up, hosted by my man, Jim Capisolatro. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Phil Stupert with HR Green, and I'm an associate with the firm, and I've been with the company about 15 years. HR Green's been in business for well over 100 years, and we're based out of the Midwest primarily, but now have expanded to Colorado and Texas and many other states around the country.
The great thing about HR Green is that with our group, we have the knowledge, we have the experience in Colorado, so we can take on the bigger projects, but it's just not our group that's going to do it. We're backed by 500 people nationwide to provide us assistance and the horsepower to get those larger projects done. When we're building a community, we're with the owner from day one, from the second he's looking at the ground to the time it's built.
We're excited to hear your vision, and we'd love to sit down and listen and strategize how we might be able to implement your project and take it from that vision to reality.
Our team is not just design professionals, we're also friends. We will work with you. We're there every step of the way. We're going to be your partner in this project. You have a vision. We're here to be your partner to collaborate and expand on that vision.
So if you have a property that you are looking to develop, we're excited to hear about it. We are all about building communities, and we would like to hear your vision and help you implement it.